Hey guys, my name is Dominik. I come to you from Poland, specifically from Łódź University, and some of you may know it as Lodz, because it's a very Polish word. And my subject today on this presentation will be from subject to actor, and that means Poland's relations with Rwanda as an example of Eastern Europe's post-colonial soft power. So, Europe. This is not Europe, this is Earth, by the way. But I think most of us here come from Europe, and we see Europe as our home, our nations, our struggles, just this standard home stuff. But as we see here, in the beginning of the 20th century, or at the very end of the 19th century, our empires, European empires, controlled most of the world, really. You can see the British, the biggest offenders of that, the French, Russians, Germans, Dutch, Danish, and Italians all control really like most of the world. And because of that, a lot of places in the world see us not as these friendly guys, but more like the conquerors, ruthless slavers, and just not very good guys, historically speaking. And one of these places is, of course, Africa, which during the scramble of Africa, which ended around just before the outbreak of the First World War, was taken mostly by the European empires. And it was very important because Germany and Italy, that were new political entities at the time, tried to take something for themselves. And right here we have German East Africa, and here we have Rwanda, which first was a colony of the Germans, and then during the First World War, Belgium came and took it from the Germans. And I also listed three things which I think are very important when we're talking about colonialism, which is dominance. Of course, the countries were completely dominated by their metropolis. Resource extraction, so of course the colonies were used to extract resources or to dump goods from the metropolis. And hierarchies, which either the colonialists created to better govern these countries, or use the existing ones to further their own goals, which was the main thing in Rwanda, because there was already a split in the society between the Hutu and Tutsi people. Tutsi were the aristocracy, and the Germans and Belgians decided that they will use this hierarchy and give even more power to the Tutsi, which from that moment onwards were not seen as just a different group, the aristocracy, but as a different race. And the Tutsi, together with the colonizers, were actually trying to find ways to show that the Tutsi are closer to white people of Europe than to the peasantry, as they could say, of the Hutu group. And now, because of what I said before, Europe could be seen as conquerors and stuff, and also we have EU, which is representing a lot of smaller countries of the EU outside of Europe. And because of that, many countries and many regions of the world could see Europe as this big monolith, not as this, like separately every country. And it doesn't help that most of the founding members, or the members that were very early in the EU, were former colonialists, like the French or the Spanish or Germans, of course, and the British, which are no longer there, but of course before Brexit they were quite known for their colonialism. But we have this small, or maybe not that small, part of Europe known as Eastern Europe. And because we're talking about Poland, we have the map of Europe just before the outbreak of the First World War. So we have Poland here. It was controlled by three countries, which was Russian Empire, German Empire, and Austria-Hungary. And because of that, we could say that really Poland is a bit of a colonial state at the moment. It really shaped the national identity of Poland, being partitioned. And then me as a Pole, we spent a lot of time in middle school just learning about being the Christ of nations, which we could see on the room, and just being these martyrs and being conquered and how bad it was, and we need to fight with the oppressors, which was really, maybe not saying that we are Christ of the nations, but which was overall very similar to other countries in the Eastern Europe or in the Balkans, which were also controlled by these big political entities. And because of that, we can say that there are some shared struggles between the African country, post-colonial countries, and the, let's say, post-colonial countries of Eastern Europe. Here I included some images, so we have these past wars, we have Polish uprisings, African uprisings in many countries against the colonizators, and then we have in the 20th century the try to decolonize the Africa or to fight with the communists in Poland. What's very interesting for me is that Rwanda wasn't just some little country that existed and was suddenly colonized. It was also a pretty big kingdom. Back in the 19th century, it was colonized very, very late, just like before the 20th century, by the Germans. So like there are some even more similarities between Rwanda and Poland because of that. They were kingdoms, then they were conquered or just colonized, and they fought for the independence to fight off their oppressors. And then we have post-colonialism in Eastern Europe, the empire of evil, as some American president put it, failed to win the Cold War and collapsed. With that, these countries like Poland, Czechoslovakia, now here Czech Republic and Slovakia, Hungary and so on, they regained their sovereignty in the international area, or countries like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus and Ukraine actually gained the independence, sometimes for the first time in their history really. And that's very important because even though they regained independence, they were part of Europe really, they were not seen as real Europe by the West. We as Eastern Europeans tried to catch up to the West. We tried to modernize, to westernize, to be more like them and less like the subjugator that was Russia. And it also was a thing in the West. Like Germans and French were actually afraid of immigrants from the Eastern Europe coming and just flooding their market with cheap labor. So a very post-colonial way of thinking about people from this area, which was very similar to the way people think about immigrants to this day, really. And what's, I think, really interesting is that Poland, and I have here another thing, so from subject to actor, Poland, when it joined the EU in 2004, it was feared that the cheap labor from Poland would flood the European markets. And right now, the Poles, 20 years later, are actually afraid of Ukrainians doing the same, even though we were like very angry that Germans and French thought like this about us. And now we do the same thing. So that's a bit strange, but I guess that's a normal human thing to just be afraid for yourself. And as I said, in 2004, we have all these countries, the eastern flank of NATO, join the EU as well. And Poland is, I think, I guess we could say the biggest example of, success really, because in this year, Poland became the 20th largest economy in the world. It is the biggest of the eastern flank of NATO, and because of the things happening in Ukraine and overall with Russia and Belarus, Poland also gained a lot of significance on the international area. Now a bit about Rwanda, because I don't think it's really a well-known country apart from the genocide that happened there in 1994. It's a very small country compared to these giants of Africa, really. So I'll zoom in a bit. You can see its neighbors. Before the colonization by the Germans, it was quite a big kingdom that controlled a lot of areas around the African Great Lakes. But right now it's quite small. It's very similar to European countries in a way, because it's only got a population of, I think, around 40 million. And what's, I think, important is that it has this, it's very stable compared to its neighbors, which is kind of their fault because they're doing a lot of not so nice and moral stuff in Democratic Republic of Congo, but we'll get to that. Now about Poland and Rwanda. This photo is very high resolution thanks to the Polish government sites, by the way. But yeah, that's the former president of Poland, Andrzej Duda, and the ambassador of Rwanda, which I don't want to say his name wrong. He actually inspired me with his lecture to research more about this subject of Polish and Rwanda relations. His name is Anastase Esiaka. And as we can see here, that's really the main thing about Polish and Rwandan relations. There's not much else apart from it. Because during the times of People's Republic of Poland, during the communist times, Poland recognized the existence and independence of Rwanda, but that was about it. And till recent years, in 2021, there was not even an embassy or any real relations between these countries. So it's a very recent thing and a very big thing that there was actually opened a Rwandan embassy in Warsaw, and it has been a year later, Polish embassy in Kigali was also opened. And the official reason for that, the Polish government said, is that because there are so many students coming from Rwanda to Poland, the ambassador himself was a student in Poland, so that's the official reason for that. Apart from it, as I said before, Rwanda is quite a stable country. It is one of the fastest developing countries in the world. And because of that, it's looking for business partners and for investments in their mining sector or in their high-tech, because in Africa, high-tech is quite popular to invest into it. And apart from that, I think it's very important for Poland itself that it can, as I said in the topic of the presentation, it can become an actor, actually, after so many years of being a subject. It can actually do stuff outside of Europe and no longer be like constrained by the biggest powers in Europe and do things its own way. Also, like many other African countries, Rwanda has a very young demographic, which is very helpful to Europe that is really, really aging and very, very fast at that. And yeah, but the main thing is soft power. And the ambassador, Esiaka, during his lecture also told that the biggest thing that can actually connect these countries is the education. So people from Rwanda come to Poland and they may see Polish people as actual friends and not as their former colonists, not as their maybe people that will try to be higher than them and impose their culture upon them and stuff. They will see similarities that we both really were harmed by these great empires. Now we can shake hands and do stuff together and actually represent it. And I think it's very important because of that for Poland to actually act as in a way, ambassador of the European Union in Africa, together with other Eastern European countries, because even though they're not, of course, as rich as Germany or France or Great Britain, it's no longer in EU, but it still does things, the Eastern European countries are actually getting richer and richer, more significant, so I think it's a very good thing to try and for Europe to actually, I don't know, it's a bad word a bit, but use them to gain some power in Africa, especially nowadays when we have China really doing the same. They're trying to really do a neo-colonialism in Africa by doing some very not nice loans in Africa, and they don't really impose their own culture. Then they just say that, okay, we'll give you money and you will have to do something for us, but that's about it. They don't come like some, for example, European countries that say, hey, you need to have this perfect democracy, otherwise you won't have money from us, which by the many Africans and many post-colonial countries are seen as another way of colonizing these countries, really, because they didn't have the time, compared to us Europeans, to develop this mechanism, right? Like they're just behind in this mechanism because they're conquered. They couldn't do that. So now they want to try things out and we don't let them because we say that our way is the best way. And yeah, they may just not really like it. And that's why they may choose, for example, China, which doesn't care about it and was also colonized. But there are some challenges and limitations to this. Here we see another picture of Andrzej Duda, and that's Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, and there is one problem that the human rights activists talk about. Paul Kagame has been a president in Rwanda since the times of the genocide, so that's around 30 years right now. And because of that, many people in Western countries see, I think that may make sense, see Rwanda as an authoritarian dictatorship. Many human activists say that there is not really a freedom of speech there. But a lot of Rwandans allow it because there is stability, they can actually live there, they have better standard of living. And I think it's very important as a European to remember that in our continent, we have it good in most of the countries, and we are quite developed. So we think about these higher values. But if you are really like developing from nothing, it's like you think about this stuff, about having food, about having nice technology, about having something to wear, and not really if this government is this perfect crystalline thing that you can like really look into and be in awe of it. And of course, there's also limitations of the economy itself. Poland is in quite a difficult situation right now because of the things happening in the world. So of course, the scope of its action is quite limited to Eastern Europe right now because of the possibilities of there being some conflicts. And lastly, I think it's important to say about some darker parts of Poland's history, because even though Polish people like to show themselves as these kind of angels and Christ of nations, they did their own colonizing, really. So during the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Polish tried to colonize Ukraine and Belarus. It was imposed, the Polish culture, upon them. Then during the interwar period, it was really the same, but we also tried to do it to the Lithuanians and some parts of the Slovaks, I guess. And there were also actual ministry approved things, approved bodies that tried to make colonies in Africa. So we tried to make friendship agreements in African countries like Angola, Liberia, and Ethiopia. But it was really a way to get them as colonies because we wanted to be trendy like the rest of Europe and have our own colonies because we felt that we deserve it and we want it as a way to defend ourselves from the influences of the Germans and Russians to the east. So I think it's very important to not just show that these Eastern European countries, because Poland is not the only example, are not these angels and Christ of nations and everything like that they're not really like fully post-colonial countries because they did their own part in colonializing. So I think it's important to include that into the discussion and say that we are a very specific part of the world that colonized countries around us, then were colonized, just a very blood-soaked part of the world. So in conclusion, I will just use my cheat here. I think the past experiences and post-colonial part of Poland's identity may help us build meaningful relations with African countries, and the increasing international position of Poland may make the soft power even stronger, but we need to stay wary of it and not change our shared struggles and soft power possibilities into new tools of oppression in Africa or in other parts of the world, because unfortunately I heard some things like this about Ukraine too, to like try to impose some values upon it too. It was a part of some politics discussion. So that will be all. Thank you very much.